The story of Clarence Elkins begins on a warm June night in 1998 in a small and quiet town in Ohio. It was the kind of town where people felt safe. Families knew one another. Neighbors waved as they passed by. And nothing truly scary ever seemed to happen there. That was why what happened that night shocked everyone so deeply. Before we dive into the story, click that subscribe button for more true crime stories like this. In a small home on a peaceful street lived a woman named Judy Johnson. Judy was a grandmother, a kind person, and someone people trusted. She had lived in that community for a long time. People knew her as gentle, loving, and always ready to help. On this night, Judy was not alone. Her 6-year-old great-niece, Brooke, was sleeping over. For a child, sleepovers are usually filled with happy things, movies, bedtime snacks, maybe a story before bed. No one expected danger. No one expected fear. And no one expected that what happened inside that house would change the lives of many people for years to come. Just after midnight, when the world outside was silent and most people were asleep, someone entered Judy's home. We will not describe the details of what happened inside. It is enough to know this. Judy lost her life that night, and little Brooke was badly hurt. She survived, but she saw something no child should ever see. When morning came, the police arrived quickly. Lights flashed. Yellow tape went up. Neighbors stepped out of their homes in shock. The small, peaceful street felt different. It felt broken. The police needed answers fast. The whole community was scared. How could such a terrible thing happen in such a quiet neighborhood? And who could have done it? People wanted safety. They wanted justice. They wanted the case solved. But there was only one person who saw the attacker, 6-year-old Brooke. She was taken to the hospital, where doctors cared for her injuries. She was frightened, tired, confused, and trying to understand what had happened. The police gently asked her questions, trying not to scare her more than she already was. They asked her who she thought she saw. At first, the answers were unclear. But then she said something that would change everything. She said the person looked like her uncle by marriage, a man named Clarence Elkins. Those few words became the center of the case. Clarence was married to Brooke's aunt, Melinda. He was not a stranger. He was part of the family. And in that moment of fear and confusion, the little girl believed she had seen someone who looked like him. The police took this seriously, very seriously. When a child says something like that, everyone pays attention. But children can be mistaken. Their minds can mix memories. They can mix fear with faces they know. They can fill in gaps without meaning to. Adults understand this. But in times of fear, people often want the first clear answer they can find. And now they had a name. Clarence was at home when the police went to speak with him. He had no idea what had happened at Judy's house. He had no idea he was about to be pulled into a nightmare that would follow him for years. When officers told him why they were there, Clarence was shocked. He denied everything. He said he had done nothing wrong. He said he wasn't near the house. He said he would never hurt Judy or Brooke. He said he loved his family and that this had to be a mistake. But the police were not sure. They had a child saying he looked like the attacker. They had a community demanding answers. They had pressure from every direction. Soon, Clarence was arrested. When he was taken away, his wife Melinda stood by him. She believed him. She knew her husband. She trusted him. And in her heart, she knew that something about the case did not feel right. But at that moment, her belief was not enough to stop what came next. The news spread fast. People whispered. Some were shocked. Others were angry. Some thought Clarence must have done it. Others felt unsure. But the weight of the accusation was heavy. The police kept looking for more evidence. They searched for fingerprints. They searched for DNA. They searched for anything that could connect Clarence to the scene. But they didn't find any. Still, the case moved forward. And when the trial began, the courtroom was full. People wanted to see what would happen. Reporters wrote stories. Families prayed. The tension in the room felt thick. The key witness was Brooke, the 6-year-old girl who survived that terrible night. She walked into the courtroom small, quiet, and holding tightly to an adult's hand. Everyone knew she was brave for even being able to speak that day. When asked to say who she believed she saw, she pointed at Clarence. That simple moment hit the courtroom like a shockwave. Even though there was no physical evidence, even though no one else placed Clarence at the scene, even though the case had holes, the little girl's words were powerful. And in the minds of many people, a child could not be lying about something so serious. Clarence kept saying he was innocent. He explained where he had been. He said he had nothing to hide. He said he loved Judy and would never hurt her. But the jury could not ignore the little girl. In 1999, Clarence Elkins was found guilty. He was sentenced to a long time in prison. Melinda cried as he was taken away. Clarence held her hand until the guards separated them. The sound of the door closing behind him was like the sound of his old life disappearing. Inside, Clarence felt a mix of fear, disbelief, and anger. He was locked away for something he said he did not do. And he knew that once a man is labeled a murderer, especially someone accused of hurting a child, life behind bars becomes even harder. He lay awake the first night in his prison cell, staring at the ceiling. The metal bars, the hard bed, the cold air, it all felt unreal. He kept thinking, how did my life fall apart so fast? How do I prove I didn't do this? How do I get home again? On the outside, Melinda refused to give up. She visited him. She wrote letters. She called lawyers. She prayed. She fought through tears and fear. She knew the truth, that her husband was not the man who hurt Judy or little Brooke. She couldn't forget that the only thing that put Clarence in prison was the frightened memory of a 6-year-old child. She also knew something else. Children can be wrong, especially when they are scared. Melinda asked for new tests. She begged for DNA testing. She asked lawyers to look deeper. She tried to raise money. She tried to get people to listen. But back then, it was harder for someone to get a case reopened. The rules were strict, and many people believed the case was already solved. Still, Melinda pushed on. She looked for every small detail. She went through every record. She spoke to anyone who would listen. She became her own detective, even if she didn't know it yet. Back in prison, Clarence tried to stay calm. He tried to stay away from trouble. He tried to focus on getting home. But prison is not an easy place. It is loud. It is tough. It is full of people who are angry, hurt, or dangerous. And when someone is in prison for a crime against a child, even wrongly, they can become a target. Clarence stayed quiet and kept to himself. He avoided fights. He wrote letters every day. He told himself he would not give up, no matter how long it took. Months became years, and slowly, Melinda began to notice something strange, something that would later become the key to breaking this case open. She learned that another man, someone with a history of violence, had lived only a few houses away from Judy Johnson at the time of the crime. His name was Earl Mann. Melinda didn't know what to do with that information yet. She didn't know if it meant anything. But something about the man bothered her. His past bothered her. His behavior bothered her. And deep inside, a thought formed. What if Clarence is not the only man the police should have looked at? She didn't know it then, but this single question would lead her down a path that would change everything. And one day, years later, something would happen inside the prison that no one could ever predict. Something that would finally open the door to the truth. But that moment, that turning point, is still far ahead. For now, Clarence sat in his cell, waiting, hoping, and trying to hold on to the belief that one day the truth would come out. And on the outside, Melinda was getting ready to do something most people would not even dare to try. She was going to solve the case herself. And she was only getting started. Years passed, and life on the outside kept moving. But for Clarence, every day felt the same. The walls around him never changed. The sounds never changed. The cold metal bars and the long nights never changed. But one thing inside him stayed alive. Hope. Hope that someone would listen. Hope that someone would look again. Hope that the truth would one day be louder than the mistake that had put him behind bars. On the outside, that someone was Melinda, his wife. She never stopped believing him. She never stopped fighting. She never stopped thinking about that night in 1998 and asking herself one question. Why did this happen the way it did? And so she kept searching. She worked long hours, saved money, and then used that money to hire people who might help. She spoke to lawyers, experts, investigators, anyone who could give her even one small path forward. She read papers and police reports and court transcripts late at night, sometimes until morning. She circled things, underlined things, and asked hundreds of questions. Most people would not have the strength to do what she did. Many families break apart under this kind of pressure. But Melinda felt something stronger than fear. She felt the truth pulling at her. She felt it whispering that there was more to the story, something important that everyone had missed. And one detail kept bothering her. A small detail. A simple detail. But one she couldn't ignore. It was that other man. The man from the neighborhood. Earl Mann. She had learned that man had a long and troubling history. He had been in trouble with the law before. He had been known for violent behavior. And at the time of the crime, He lived only a few doors away from Judy's house. At first, she didn't want to jump to conclusions. She wasn't trying to blame someone else just to free Clarence. She only wanted the truth. She wanted to understand whether anyone else had been looked at carefully. So she began reading more about man. She searched through old cases, old files, and old reports. She learned things that made her uneasy. Things that made her wonder why he hadn't been checked more deeply from the start. But what really pushed her was something she heard from someone who knew man. They said that on the night of the crime, man had been acting strangely. Very strangely. But back then, no one thought much of it. People didn't yet know what had happened inside Judy's house. Still, Melinda felt something in her chest when she heard it. Something she couldn't ignore. What if the wrong man was in prison? What if the right man was still free? This thought shook her. It scared her. But it also gave her a direction. She began to focus on Earl Mann more closely. She brought this information to lawyers. She brought it to legal groups. She asked for help. And slowly, some people started listening. Around this time, years after Clarence had already been locked up, something happened that no one could have predicted. Something that Melinda could never have planned, even in her boldest dreams. Earl Mann was arrested on another crime, and he was sent to prison. To the same prison where Clarence was serving time. The moment Melinda heard this, her heart dropped. She knew what that meant. She knew the danger. If Mann was a violent man, and his record showed he was, then Clarence could be in serious trouble. But there was something else too. If Mann was guilty of what happened to Judy, he would never want Clarence to learn anything about him. He would want things to stay quiet. Melinda worried. She called the prison. She told Clarence during visits to stay away from Mann. She warned him again and again. But prison is not like the outside world. You cannot control who walks past you. You cannot control who sleeps near you. You cannot control who ends up in your block. And one day, Clarence saw Mann. He recognized him from photos. Mann looked rough, angry, and unpredictable. Clarence felt a chill, not because he was scared of Mann, but because he wondered if the truth about that terrible night was standing just a few feet away. For weeks, Clarence watched him quietly. He didn't speak to him. He didn't raise suspicion. He didn't want to start a fight or draw attention. He only observed. And then something happened. One day, Mann was outside in the prison yard. He smoked a cigarette, took the last puff, and then dropped the cigarette but on the ground before walking away. Most people might ignore such a small thing. But Clarence did not. He stared at the cigarette on the ground. He remembered something his lawyers had told him. If they could get DNA from Mann, and if that DNA matched the DNA found at the crime scene, then the entire case could change. The problem was that no one could force Mann to give a DNA sample at that time. But here, right in front of Clarence, was a cigarette, but that Mann had just touched with his mouth. Clarence's heart pounded. Cigarette, but could have DNA. DNA could prove the truth. This might be the only chance he would ever get. But picking it up was dangerous. If anyone saw him take something from Mann, it could start trouble. Fights. Questions. Questions that Mann might not want anyone asking. So Clarence waited. He waited for the guards to turn. He waited for the yard to get louder. He waited until Mann walked far away. Then, in the smallest, fastest motion he could manage, he bent down, grabbed the cigarette butt, and hid it. He slid it into a napkin and tucked it away in his clothes. His heart felt like it was going to burst out of his chest. He knew that if he was caught, he could be punished or even hurt. But he also knew he had no choice. This tiny cigarette, but could be the key to everything. That night, Clarence barely slept. Every sound in the prison made him sit up. Every footstep made him worry someone had seen what he did. But no one came to his cell. No one asked him questions. He stayed quiet, calm, and careful. When the next visiting day came, Clarence handed the cigarette butt to his lawyer. It was wrapped tightly, protected, and almost glowing with hope. His lawyer did not waste time. They sent it to a lab for testing, quietly, secretly, and very carefully. Days passed, then weeks. Waiting felt endless. During that time, Melinda felt her heart racing every day. She could barely focus at work. She kept checking her phone. She kept asking the lawyer for updates. She kept praying. And then the call came. The results were in. The DNA on the cigarette but matched the DNA found at the crime scene. It was Mann's DNA, not Clarence's. Not even close. Melinda broke down crying. Clarence's lawyer held the phone, speechless. They had the proof they had spent years searching for. This DNA result was the kind of evidence that did not bend, did not lie, and did not change with time. But even with this powerful truth, the fight was not over. The court system does not move fast, especially in old cases. Things take time. Papers need to be filed. Judges need to review information. Hearings must be scheduled. And even then, there is always resistance. Some people do not like to admit that a mistake was made. Some worry about their reputations. Some worry about opening old wounds. But Clarence, after years of silence and pain, now had something that could not be ignored. Melinda and the lawyers pushed hard. They brought the DNA results to the court. They showed the facts. They showed the errors. They showed the truth. And finally, after years of darkness, light began to break through. The case was reopened. People began to talk. Reporters came back. Lawyers on both sides prepared for something big. Clarence waited in his cell again. But this time the waiting felt different. This time there was hope with every sunrise. He could almost taste freedom. But he didn't want to get too excited. He had been through too much to believe it was over until someone opened the door and told him he could go home. Meanwhile, Melinda kept pushing forward. She spoke to experts. She held interviews. She stood in courtrooms. She became one of the strongest voices in the entire case. People started to admire her for something remarkable. She had done what almost no one else could. She found the truth when others had stopped looking. Even the judge, reading through the new evidence, could see it clearly now. The case against Clarence was collapsing. The evidence pointed somewhere else, toward the very man Melinda had suspected years ago. All that remained was one final step, one final decision, one final ruling, one final moment that would decide whether Clarence would stay behind the bars that had held him for over 6 long years, or whether he would step into sunlight again. That moment was coming, and it would change everything. Clarence Elkins sat in his prison cell, staring at the small square window high above his bed. Morning light was creeping in, but it didn't warm him. Not today. Today was the day everything he had fought for, everything he had risked, everything he had uncovered from behind bars, finally met the real world. Down the hallway, the guards were waking people up for the morning count. Radios buzzed. Doors clanged. But Clarence felt strangely calm. After years of fighting, this calmness felt like a warning, like the world was holding its breath. The DNA he fought to collect, the evidence he unearthed, the truth he dragged out from inside a violent man named Earl Mann. It had all reached the court, and today, the judge would give his final decision. Still, doubt tried to crawl into Clarence's mind. What if something went wrong? What if they found a way to stop his release? He had seen it happen before. Cases delayed, cases twisted, hope crushed for reasons that made no sense to anyone but the system. He closed his eyes, whispering the same words he had whispered every morning for years. Just let the truth win. The sound of keys outside his door shook him out of his thoughts. Clink, turn, click. The door rolled open, metal grinding against metal. A guard stepped in. His voice was flat, but not cold. Elkins, let's go. Clarence stood. This time, he wasn't being led to the law library, or to a lawyer visit, or to another lonely meeting where he begged someone to believe him. This time, they were taking him out. His hands were cuffed, but he barely noticed. His heart was beating too hard. He felt every step of the long walk as if it echoed through all the years he had spent locked away. As he moved through the hallway, other inmates looked at him. Some nodded. Some whispered. Clarence had been known for years as the innocent guy who wouldn't shut up. Many prisoners said that about themselves, but his case was different. Everyone had seen how hard he worked. Everyone had seen him chase the truth, piece by piece, day after day. And now, the truth had chased back. Clarence was taken outside to a transport van. The cold metal bench inside made his skin tighten. He looked out through the tiny window as the prison gates opened. He didn't speak. He couldn't. For the first time in years, he was seeing the world without a fence in front of it. Trees, cars, clouds, people, simple, everyday things that had once been normal but now felt unreal. Like a dream he wasn't sure he was allowed to have. The van headed toward the courthouse, the place where everything would finally be decided. When Clarence arrived, his lawyer was waiting. A calm, steady woman with a voice that never cracked under pressure. She had believed him long before the evidence showed he was right. And she had pushed, step by step, until the truth surfaced. "You ready?" she asked. He nodded. "I've been ready for years." They walked inside together. The courtroom was full. Reporters, lawyers, even strangers who had followed his case. Some people looked angry, wondering how something like this could have happened. Some looked hopeful. Some looked ashamed. And then, in the front row, his wife was waiting. Clarence froze. His throat tightened. For a moment, the world around him fell silent. She had stood by him when many would have walked away. She had visited. She had fought. And she had helped bring the truth to light. He whispered, "Thank you." She smiled, eyes full of tears. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Court came to order. And then it began. The prosecutor stood first. But this time, he wasn't there to fight Clarence. This time, he was there to admit the system had made a terrible mistake. He cleared his throat, looking at the papers in front of him. "Your Honor, we now know, with absolute certainty, that Clarence Elkins did not commit the crime he was convicted of. New DNA evidence has been tested and confirmed. The real attacker was Earl Mann." A murmur moved through the courtroom. Clarence kept his eyes on the judge. His hands were shaking, even in the cuffs. The prosecutor continued. "We also confirmed that Mr. Elkins himself played a major role in discovering the truth. While incarcerated, he identified the real suspect, pushed for DNA testing, and provided evidence that fully cleared him." Mr. Clarence felt his chest tighten. The words didn't feel real. Hearing the system say he was innocent felt like rewriting the past, but the past still lived inside him. His lawyer stepped forward. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "my client has lost years of his life. Years he can never get back. But today, we ask for the one thing that can still be given to him: freedom." The judge looked at Clarence. Then came the moment he had waited for. "Elkins," the judge said, "you are hereby fully exonerated. Your conviction is overturned. You are free to go." For a second, Clarence didn't move. He couldn't breathe. The sound didn't make sense. "Free. Free." The guard behind him stepped forward and unlocked the cuffs. The metal dropped away from his wrists. Clarence touched his own hands, as if making sure they were really his. His wife rushed forward and hugged him. The whole room blurred as tears filled his eyes. After years of pain, fear, and fighting, he was finally free. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around Clarence, microphones aimed like arrows. Flashing cameras lit up the steps. "Clarence, how does it feel to be free? What do you want to say to the state? What will you do now? Do you blame anyone?" Questions flew at him from every direction. But Clarence only answered in the simplest, clearest way he could. "I'm grateful. I'm free. And I forgive the people who made mistakes, even if those mistakes cost me years. But I want people to understand the system needs to change." His wife held his hand tightly. He looked up at the sky. No bars. No walls. Just open space. He was free, yes. But freedom didn't erase what happened. Freedom didn't erase the nights he lay awake, wondering if he would die in prison for something he didn't do. Freedom didn't erase the day he stood in a bathroom with the man who actually committed the crime. Freedom didn't erase the fear, the anger, or the endless fight. But freedom did give him something new. A chance to rebuild. A chance to heal. A chance to help others so they never suffer what he did. The first days after his release felt strange. Simple things, like walking on grass, drinking cold soda, touching a door without asking permission, felt like miracles. But some moments were harder. Noise scared him. Crowds overwhelmed him. People moved too fast. The world had changed while he was gone. Yet he kept going. He used his story to teach others about wrongful convictions. He stood in front of schools, colleges, and groups of lawyers, telling them exactly what it felt like to be locked away for a crime he never committed. He spoke slowly, clearly, so everyone could understand. Even young people, even children. He said, "When the wrong person is in prison, the real person is still out there. So the system has to be careful. It has to be fair. And it has to listen." People listened. And slowly, the world began to see him not as a man who had been locked up, but as a man who helped fix a broken system. Years later, Clarence filed a lawsuit. Not out of revenge, but for justice. For the years he lost. For his family. For his future. The state eventually agreed and paid him millions of dollars, a sign that they admitted a terrible wrong had been done. With that money, Clarence didn't run away from the past. He didn't disappear. He used it to build a better life, yes, but also to help others who were still in the same place he once was. He helped fund groups that worked to free innocent people. He spoke to lawmakers. He became a voice for those who had no voice. His story, his pain, became power. As for Earl Mann, the real attacker, he eventually confessed. Not openly, not proudly, but enough for the truth to be stamped into the records forever. He was already serving time for other crimes. But now, The world knew what he had done long before. The pieces finally fit. The puzzle finally made sense. Because Clarence had refused to give up. Because he had looked danger in the face and said, "You will not win." Today, Clarence is remembered as something rare. An innocent man who proved his own innocence from inside a prison cell. He became a symbol of strength, patience, and relentless truth. He showed the world that even when the system fails, even when it seems impossible, even when every door is locked, the truth can still break out. His story teaches something simple, something even a child can understand. Never stop fighting for what is right. Not because victory is guaranteed, but because sometimes one person's fight can change everything.